Jerome, are you playing the music? All right, hello everyone. Welcome to EduTalk 876 13th live session. I am Dr. Annette Walker. This evening, Dr. Shawnee Hardware and Mrs. Fiona Lloyd-Henry, with our esteemed panelists, will be discussing the topic, Revolutionizing Education Through Technology. We'd like to welcome and thank all our participants here on Zoom and viewers on YouTube for joining and listening in this evening. I know you might be wondering why this topic. The past 2 years have taught us the importance of being proactive in preparing for and responding to unpredictable challenges. This evening, we have 3 members of the Smart Term Limited team who are here to share their expertise in this area of edutech. Before we begin the conversation, let me formally introduce them to our guests and viewing audiences listening here on Zoom and YouTube. First, we have Mr. Ayodele Pompey. He is an entrepreneur and CISU technology and product executive who works with public and private educational institutions, districts, and governments to improve the quality of education and operational effectiveness. After spending 12 years as an educator and examiner and 20 years in the technology industry, Ayodele knows how to help institutions maximize their potential through digital transformation, stakeholder engagement, and technology diffusion. As co-founder and chief executive officer at Smart Term, Ayodele has helped scale the company tenfold in 18 months. He's responsible for deploying educational technology to over 600 schools in the US, Canada, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and Bahamas, and 8 other countries amassing millions of assessments annually. Ayodele has worked at companies in North America, South America, Europe, the United Kingdom, and the Caribbean. In 2018, he was named one of the top innovators in the Caribbean. Wow. He's also a member of the board of directors for the Eastern Caribbean Telecommunications Authority, establishing rules and procedures in a regulatory environment for the authority's directorate. That's a whole mouthful there. Ayodele is a certified product manager with a master's degree in advanced computer science and information technology management from the University of Manchester and the Manchester Business School in England. He also has a bachelor's degree in computer science and mathematics from the University of the West Indies in Barbados. Amazing. Up next, we have Jamie Hoyt. She's the co-founder and director of grants and projects at Smart Term Limited, a Caribbean-based education technology company. She has over 9 years in the research and digital marketing industry. Jamie is an award-winning innovator and has worked and partnered with many regional and international organizations. Her expertise in strategic leadership extend into specialized area of research, development, and analysis, policy and procedure development, and brand strategy in competitive environments. Ms. Hoyt has completed her education at the University of the West Indies, obtaining a Bachelor's of Science in Economics and International Relations, and moved on to completing a master's degree in Global Studies, specializing in economics and foreign aid. She has also completed a 1-month scholarship in India on international management for suitable growth and development at the India Institute of Public Administration. And up next, we have Dr. Theon O'Connor. He is the Director of Communications for Smart Term, where with other members of the leadership team, he assists in setting the communications and public relations direction of the business. Theon has more than 10 years of experience in education, in student affairs, public affairs, communication, stakeholder community engagement, and Government Relations. As the Director of Student and Registrar Services at Yorkville University, he supports student success through strategic planning and equitable deployment of resources. Theon is the former Associate Director of the National Regulatory and Government Affairs at Yorkville University and the Toronto Film School, where he provided regulatory and government relations counsel surrounding the university's academic programs and support services. He has also worked with various ministries of education here in Canada, and prior to working at Yorkville, Theon worked for 5 years at Georgetown University in the United States of America. Theon has a doctoral degree in education from Western University, a master's degree in public relations and corporate communication from Georgetown University, and a bachelor's degree in government from Georgetown as well. So there you have it, everyone. For esteemed panelists, I turn it over now to my co-host, Shawnee, who will pose the first question.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Walker, Annette, for those lovely introductions. By the introductions, I've seen, or we can see that our panelists are quite educated about this topic. They have various skills and expertise that they're bringing. So since you have shared so much about their experience, I want them to discuss their work and how that has impacted the education system, both in the Caribbean and elsewhere.
Okay, thank you. Really good question, Dr. Hardware. So Smart Term over the past 6 years, and for those who are listening, and Smart Term is an educational technology company. And we specialize in management solutions that really help schools to manage student information, school operations, and learning. And so our platform primarily is an end-to-end solution that allows schools to manage the entire life cycle of the student from all the way from applicant to alumni. And so we handle all of the major processes within a school. And so after the first, we started out in 2016. And at that point, at that time, in the Caribbean, you had a number of schools, probably over 90% of schools in the Caribbean, that were completely manual. And so, I mean, we started out by really trying to help schools to simplify the reporting process, to ensure and that there were minimal errors and that the process took a shorter time frame to complete. And over time, and through feedback from our customers, we've really added like numerous amount of modules that now is this collective, integrated suite of solutions. And what we've seen from our interactions with our schools is that schools have massively improved their operations. And so some tasks that usually would take weeks to complete is now available at the press of a button. And what we've seen is that schools have, through systematic improvement of their systems, have now been able to increase their capacity and start to really develop their education system within their school. One of the really powerful things, and that I think our solution has allowed for a lot of our schools to do, is to really integrate parents more into the education in the education cycle. And so previously, a lot of our schools, would only periodically communicate with parents, and parents would only be able to see a report, maybe for some schools it would be twice per term, or for some schools it would only be once per term. But one of the things that I really love seeing is parents being actively a part of their children's education. They're communicating with parents with teachers through the use of our chat features, and they've been able to see like progress reports. And so they're really, especially through COVID really allowed parents to become really more involved. And I think that momentum has continued even arguably post-COVID. Some people would still say we're still in the middle of COVID, but I think we're beginning to see the end of COVID and we're seeing a new era emerge. But what we have been doing has really been greatly affecting the capacity of our schools, the capacity of our teachers, the involvement of our parents. And we're starting to see students really thrive in these new educational modalities.
Mm-hmm. I love the passion with which you describe the work that you do, especially in terms of parental involvement and the increased parental involvement. I know, speaking from my experience in Jamaica years ago, the need for more, I think, automatic systems. And I think this is everywhere, but based on my experience, I'm happy to hear that, you are providing a suite of services. I now hand it over to Jamie or Theon, if you'd like to contribute.
Yeah, if I can contribute to what Ayodele already stated, I would say that, SMART believes in sustaining education through innovation and technology, particularly in developing countries. And we want to ultimately close that education gap and increase equity as well as equality of life for all of us students and teachers and parents who are within that education ecosystem. Essentially, our aim is to enhance that learning experience for the students, and enable youth in these developed countries to become globally competitive. We also want to encourage, schools, governments, principals, teachers, and parents and corporate entities as well to, partner with us, to make this a widespread possibility for our future generations and, for our education system to thrive and develop.
All right. I think that covered it well. So I won't add anything else to that.
Okay. It was about your work and the contribution to education system, but I get it. Okay. I'll now hand over to Fiona.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hardware and Ayodele for that beautiful response. Ayodele and Jamie for those responses. I particularly liked towards the end where you talked about how this can advance the work of equity, which is always a concern for me. Now, as indicated in your vision statement, your goal is not only to support educators, reduce their workload, but to ensure that students maximize their full potential. Given the recent Patterson report about the lack of returns on investment in education, that is in terms of equitable educational outcomes, do all students, especially those who come from low socioeconomic statuses, have equitable access to education? What steps should the government and or educational institutions take to ensure equity of access?
Right. So I think this is a really, really important question, especially as we have recently been, well, we're kind of still in a pandemic, although some people may say that we're coming to the end of it. But the pandemic has really exacerbated this issue around kind of equity and equitable access to education. I like to call it most times the issue of the haves and the have-nots, mainly because those people who have the ability to do what they need to do and to get access to education in ways that the people who do not have that access cannot. So one of the interesting things that we spoke about in the last question was around parental involvement and the fact that parents who are more involved, their kids tend to do better. So when you have parents who work several jobs to make ends meet and they have no time to spend with their kids to help their kids develop and to learn, their kids are going to suffer, right? And that's going to be a big problem that we'll see for many of those students as they continue through the life cycle from kind of elementary, primary, high school, etc. Right? And it's gonna of course impact their overall educational success. So kids who have parents who can afford, for example, extra lessons when they are struggling in class, they can afford it, they tend to do a lot better there. So when we look at the steps that government and education institutions need to take in order to ensure equity, so I think both government and education institutions have a huge part to play. First and foremost, we like to talk about how governments need to pump more money into the system. There's always a lot of that conversation. But there also needs to be kind of a look at the direction to which this funding needs to be prioritized and ensuring that it goes into those specific areas, right? And then we're looking at both academic and also non-academic supports to ensure that students are able to succeed and have equitable access to education. So those students who are unable to afford extra classes or extra lessons, we want to ensure that they have certain academic supports to be able to help them, tutoring services, math help, English help, etc. And I could continue with those academic services, but what I want to talk about here is probably most important that people tend to forget are the non-academic supports. And I know that oftentimes mental health, there's a lot of stigma around mental health and students not wanting to go and seek counseling or wellness services. And of course, those things have a real impact on the academic component of your journey, right? How well you do academically. So ensuring that there's access to mental health services, ensuring that you deal with issues such as food insecurity, because I remember growing up, there are a lot of students who came to school, you expected them to perform well in class, but they didn't eat. So how are they going to perform if they're unable to have the type of food and diet and nutrition that is important to help them to be able to perform in class adequately? And then the things that we hear about a lot of times, such as having more tablets or access to various hardware so that students can access online learning, access to Wi-Fi, for example, for students who are in remote areas who have no access, and there's online education. So we have to look at both academic supports as well as provision of non-academic supports to ensure that students have equitable access to education.
Thank you so much for that response, and for putting it not just within the context of technology and the access that students have, but for broadening it to also include mental health supports, for example, you mentioned, and access to food. I'm not sure how we are for time, but I would love for us to engage more about what access could look like for technologies. I think you ended with a focus on both access to Wi-Fi, that you could argue, for example, I think it should be just like any utility, and just like we have electricity and running water, you should have Wi-Fi. I think we are at that place now, or equitable access to hardware. But I'd love for us to talk a little bit more about equitable access to particular types of software, or how children use, not just consume technology, but how they're actually creating, how they're getting access to things where they can create, where they can develop, where they can communicate more. I'd love to talk a little bit more about what access could look like in those particular areas, but I suspect that we might, I don't know if we have enough time for you to say anything about that, or.
Go ahead, Eda.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I think one of the first things that I want to underscore here is how incredibly complex the whole concept of equity in education. And if you listen to Theon's earlier response, you can see that there's so many facets to this thing. But as it relates to technology, I think we particularly highlighted students from low socioeconomic backgrounds. And I think the first thing is about ensuring that these students have access to the same resources and that other students have. And I think now the future is digital. I don't think anybody is complaining or anyone is debating about that. The future is digital, and for education, it's no different. And I think this is one of the low-hanging fruits that technology provides us with, a really great opportunity. Because first and foremost, I think that we have to get to a point where there's like content online is ubiquitous for our students, and it is accessible to all students, regardless of where they come from, where they live, what racial group they belong to, ethnic group they belong to. Everyone should have access. And I think particularly in the Caribbean, one of the things that we're lacking is Caribbean-based content, curriculum-aligned Caribbean-based content. And I think this is something for our regional creators, content creators to latch onto, because it really needs to be a lot more content creation. Our kids need to see people that look like us on this call, right? During the pandemic, when teachers almost overnight had to move to an online or hybrid modality, what we found was that teachers had to lean upon content made in the US, content made in the UK, content from India, and all of these different places. And I think that's really unfortunate. And so I think that what hits to the core of this whole concept of equity is ensuring that every student has access to these academic supports, and that I think should be ubiquitous, and students have access to and develop their own level of mastery inside and outside of the classroom. And so that's one area. I'm not sure if my colleagues would like to join in on this particular point.
Yeah, I mean, I want to jump. Okay, Jamie, I apologize. Please go ahead.
No, I just kind of wanted to sum up those points in that when it comes to ensuring equitable access, you have to look at who are the stakeholders of education, and that will be, the parents, students, teachers, and in that way, you'd find that the ministries now have to work hand in hand, and I'm saying ministries of youth and social development, working hand in hand with the ministries of education per se, to ensure that these stakeholders, these particular groups, the parents, students, and teachers are supported in whichever way they need to be supported. For example, Tion mentioned, parents having to work 2 and 3 jobs to sustain the household, that type of thing. So, social programs can be developed to bolster the effort parents are making at home, just like with students. COVID has shown us that, we need to be digital. We need to understand technology, and, internet access is something that it goes hand in hand, like having textbooks and school bags to actually go to school, So having internet access, having access to a device, a laptop or a tablet is so important to support students. And then teachers, we always hear our teachers complaining about not having enough time, So, governments can look at systems and different ways of doing things in order to automate the processes teachers have to go through on a daily basis, try to automate some of those processes to make their lives much more easier.
Right. I think the final thing I want to add to that is it's a multifaceted approach to this. There's no one size fits all approach here. There are a lot of different things that would have to be done in order to ensure that it's equitable for all. When you look at even the rural areas of some of our countries, it's very difficult to get, of course, internet there. But you could look at that approach to say, well, maybe we can find a satellite area where these people can come, where they may be access to internet. But then you also have to look at, well, can they get there? Like, are there roads that are there that where they can actually travel to get to those specific areas? So there are a lot of different things that have to be dealt with from an infrastructural standpoint, whether that be roads or general technology or Wi-Fi, etc. That has to be looked at. And Idel spoke a lot about just having content there, right, where students can access. But again, that comes down to the ability to have Wi-Fi to connect and to have that access there. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a multifaceted approach to this. There's no one size fits all. There's going to be a lot of different things that must be done in order to ensure equity across the board.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for all that rich information. I think you may have touched on, some of the responses in terms of the next question I'll be asking. So when we think about COVID-19 and the realities that exist, I know some of the panelists mentioned that COVID-19 is ongoing, or maybe we're at the end of it. But my question is, what are some of the promises and challenges of technology use for educators? And that includes teachers and principals and students. In the interest of time, we're now 7:28, just a few more minutes, and we have a lot of questions to go. I'm wondering if perhaps our panelists will be able to just briefly provide or to build on some of what they have actually mentioned earlier, because you intimated some of the responses to this question already.
So,
who would like to go?
yeah, I can add to this in terms of some of the promises and challenges. We have seen that, when it comes to incorporating properly in the classroom, tools such as computers, video conferencing, and even artificial intelligence can be used to supplement the children's education, provide support to students with disabilities as well, and even to have a wider variety of additional benefits, right? So some of the main challenges faced by teachers, principals, students, as you rightfully mentioned, would have been tech savviness, sorry. So for example, individuals not knowing how to use or navigate technology was some of the main things that we saw, and even teachers being reluctant to actually learn the technology. So now that teachers are being reluctant to learn this technology, you find that there's a lot of anxiety with using online platforms. You find that, they don't want to, engage fully with students within that virtual setting, as well as there's poor infrastructure. So we talked about some of this already in terms of no access to internet and devices. And then there's just resistance to change, and that goes hand in hand with the reluctancy to learn. Some teachers being stuck in their old ways, not willing to learn the technology again. And then, what we're finding, with our principals and our administrators is that budget being one of, a main thing. So, this is always a challenge. Principals have to make that decision, for with their limited resources. Government should definitely embark on a national rollout of platforms to govern schools so that, they can segment it by district, segmented by communities, so that they can benefit also from that data that they're getting from, setting up these national wide systems, so that governments can benefit from the data that will help make, future decisions when it comes to planning for education.
Awesome. But on that note, though, I want to ask a follow-up question with that, though, Jamie, if I may. So I hear you say that, and that's true in some instances where we have teachers who are a bit reluctant, but I'm wondering if perhaps there isn't adequate training, because I know for a fact that there are teachers who are interested in learning more about technology, but they're just not getting the training to do so. So in terms of your organization, what does Smart Term Limited provide? Do you provide training for teachers, or I want you to expound on that? Or
yes, definitely. So yes, coming out of COVID, we saw, it was like a massive exodus to get on the internet, right? All the schools needed to go digital, needed to get into that online environment, and digital literacy was definitely a main hindrance in, speeding up that process. So what we at Smart particularly had set up in terms of, getting students, getting teachers, getting them that support. Initially, when schools come onto our platform, we will have that training. We would provide that initial training as well as periodic training to give refreshers of the platform itself. We would also meet with schools on a one-to-one basis. So, they can identify their challenges, let us know their challenges, and we'll personally meet with them and, try to help resolve some of those challenges. There's also within the platform, there's in platform prompts. So this will help communicate to the individuals who are utilizing the platform how to navigate, different settings. So, different functions, different modules that we have within the platform is in platform prompts. We also have something called a knowledge bank, with frequently asked questions that we have outfitted within the platform. So they can definitely go to those areas and, see where it is their challenges fall, and they'll have solutions to their challenges there. Also, pre-recorded videos is something that we, utilize heavily in the early stages, because with the amount of schools and teachers that we had to deal with, it was becoming a little bit strenuous on the resources that we had at that time. So, we decided to do pre-recorded videos, we load them to YouTube, and we distribute whenever there is a challenge, whenever a challenge comes up for our teachers. And this also will help them to troubleshoot as well. Some of them who, want to tackle it on their own and, kind of get into it hands-on, the pre-recorded videos assisted greatly. Some of the other things that, we have done is hosted workshops. So within that 2-year period of COVID, even now, we have hosted many workshops and trainings for teachers, even some parents in some cases, and students. And we have developed something called Smart Shops, which basically is workshops to educate not only on the technical aspect of things, but we again look at education from a holistic standpoint, developing everyone within that ecosystem. So it's not about us having a platform, an education technology platform, and we sell it to you, and we just tell you go and figure it out yourself. We provide that level of support, and we have seen the Smart Shops has been really good. Our last workshops with the Smart Shops, we would have seen over 385 teachers participating, and they would have learned things from mental health, classroom engagement, how to animate a PowerPoint, how to, do different techniques to engage students within the classroom. So it's not just about the education technology or, us having the software to manage your school online, but really what goes on within that education ecosystem, that online world. How can we support teachers? How can we provide solutions to some of the other challenges that they are having? So, these are some of the things that we have implemented. We are also in communication with some of the governments within the Caribbean region, to address some of the challenges that concerns the Caribbean education system, especially when it comes to education technology, as well as developing, that infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. I turn it over to Fiona.
Could I just add one 10-second bit? So
Okay.
training is a staple of what we do, right? But this is what I love the most about it. For most other platforms out there, it's extremely expensive. So people don't have the ability to actually pay for it and get training, right?
Right.
So most of the times you're purchasing something off the shelf that you have to figure out how you're going to use it, and you have to bend to use it in the way that you want to use it. For us, we customize in many ways, where we are going in and we're constantly, there's an issue, we're going in, we're adding new features, so we have to keep training people to make sure that it fits your needs. So that's one of the things that I absolutely love about what we offer at Smart Turn.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think this is actually a great way for us to segue into. It's a great way for us to segue into the next question.
Yeah.
Because there's still a reluctance we've said about teachers adopting some of these ed tech for any number of reasons, and we know that there's this sort of disconnect. Given your focus on education, how have you and your organization supported communities and educators to improve their knowledge and use of educational technologies? How are you helping?
So I can definitely take this, but I don't know if anybody else wants to add shed some
Go
light
for
on
it.
this as well.
Go for it, Jamie. Go for it. Because I think you started to really talk about a lot of these things.
She mentioned
Go
some.
for it, Jamie.
Yeah,
Go
I
right
have
ahead,
mentioned
Jamie.
some of it before, but I can just, kind of expand on what we have been doing. So for the past 6 years, as I said, we're focused on education technology. And as I mentioned, we definitely have to support the community because, we can't really just, throw them out into the sea and expect them to, just swim by themselves. So we have created a number of programs that will, definitely assist our teachers, assist our students, and in some cases, our parents. So some of the initiatives that we came up with was, for example, we had principal roundtable. So this is basically where we gather, principals across the Caribbean region, to discuss some of the challenges that they're having and how can we as an organization, an EdTech organization, be of assistance or be of solution, or maybe be that company or that entity that advocates for some of these solutions to these challenges our principals are having. I spoke about the smart shops already, where teachers get that experience in terms of developing, in terms of learning different skills, in terms of learning how to deal with children, how to deal with aggressive children, mental health in a virtual world. So different topics, many other different topics we would have covered at the smart shops, and it's something that the teachers absolutely love because it takes them out of the natural academic settings and really giving them that developmental side to to their work. We also have workshops and trainings, and these would have been more targeted workshops, more targeted trainings, where it comes to learning about the Smart Term platform as well, and any other topics. So for example, we had one session on parenting in the pandemic. So parents would have attended, students as well as teachers would have attended that segment, and it's just development for themselves. We developed something called the summer school. Summer school is basically lessons in the summer for the July, August vacation. Those students who need, that extra push going into the new term, so whether it's maths, English, science, they can come and learn on these different topics, as well as a big highlight to the summer school is the STEM programs. And, we feel like, apart from, having your traditional subjects, we believe that students from an early age should be exposed to some of these STEM fields. STEM rule the world, technology is ruling the world, and some of these fields are some of the higher paying fields, and we want to expose it at an early age to our young students. So we have been doing that for the past 2 years, and it's been going really well. Students are learning how to code, how to build websites, how to do electrical, so these different things that they're learning that can also, add to their academics. And one of the things that we do with the summer school as well, we look at 21st century skills. So we look at top experts in their fields, where they would come in and give back to these students, share on, communications on social media, how to make a marketing plan, how to, just learn different skills that they can, add to their resume, they can add to their holistic development. And finally, we have something called the Fast Track, which is currently being run. These are CXC/CSEC classes for students who are taking the January exams as well as the June CXC exams. So these classes are geared to, provide that extra assistance for our students.
Mm-hmm.
All right, quickly, I just want to add some numbers here, right? So in 2022 alone, We have educated over 3,000 teachers, spending hundreds of hours spent with teachers in group settings and also in one-on-one. One of the interesting things we do, which I'm not sure how long we can keep up, is that for every new beginning of the year, we try to be a part of our school's professional development week for free. So we would, spend half of a day with the school, ensuring and that we sharpen their skills before the start of a new school term. And so these are some of the things that we're doing with regards to ensuring that our educators have the skills required to make the best use of the technologies.
Thank you for your response. I could talk to both of you for a really long time, but I'm conscious that we have well, all three of you, because I think this is something that's so important. As I'm not in the classroom anymore, but I do know that as a classroom teacher, I would, there were many times I would have liked it if the folks developing or sharing or selling or promoting the ed tech had an understanding of what, what my classroom was like. Like, I would have wanted to talk to them about, this is the program that I have. This is what I'd love to develop. This is what I'd love to bring to kids. How can you work through to make this more sort of subject specific or specific to what I want? Earlier you talked about educational tech. We talked about access, and we talked about content reflecting the identities, for example, of students in the Caribbean. Like, if we don't have to see another image of another white man selling anything, so much the better, right? And so how do we ensure that, the technology that we use, that we know that the field of technology excludes Black folks, right? Excludes women. So how could we start to ensure that our content is reflective of the identities of the students that we have? And that this provides an opportunity for those students to start actually seeing themselves in these spaces, to say, here are some places that we could go, and here's something that we can do because it's open to me. But like I said, I really could talk all night, and I'm sure both Shani and Annette there's like, your time's up, Fiona. So I am going to pass it over to Shani. Shani?
I see that I'm muted. Well, thank you very much for that answer to that question. And I know, Jamie, I'm hearing your marketing experience coming out very strongly in the way that you discuss the services that you offer. You also intimated about 21st century skills, and I know in most curriculum documents now that is the buzzword, right? Curriculum 21st century skills, especially as it relates to promoting critical thinking, and very neatly attached also to STEM or STEAM, based on your philosophical approach to the sciences. So I want you to discuss, you say you have your STEM sessions with students, but what needs to happen, what further reforms are needed to ensure that students in the Caribbean, in Jamaica, the persons that you work with, are developing those 21st century skills so that they're becoming producers of knowledge rather than consumers. And I know that we're beginning to see a shift, especially with the marketization, as well as the being able to make money from social media content. But as suggested, we do need to see more content develop in the Caribbean. So what do you think needs to happen at a governmental level, but also different levels of the education system?
Yeah, great question. Absolutely amazing question. I think first and foremost, I think governments need to have a vision of who the ideal citizen should look like. Right. Some years ago, CARICOM came out with this concept of the ideal Caribbean citizen or the ideal Caribbean person, which kind of reflected the kind of knowledge and skills and attitudes, that the Caribbean, ideal Caribbean person needs to have. And I think I think in order for us to have this unified, integrated approach to something like this, there needs to be some vision, something that we can all follow. And I think each government needs to consider what that looks like. Once we've identified what that looks like, then there is the curriculum reform around what do we need to teach at the primary level, at the preschool level, at the secondary level, to ensure that we're developing the kind of citizens and that we need for our own national development imperatives. And I think this has to be something and that first of all happens in our education system, because that needs to permeate between the subjects, how many sessions per week, which sort of literacies are mandatory, how do we structure our assessments in school, which needs to be varied, by the way, but that's a topic for another discussion. And then, we have what I see happening, which is a really promising sign for us, is that there are a lot of other organizations that are popping up across the Caribbean who are trying to fill these gaps. Because when we talk about, these 21st century skills, we're not only talking about critical thinking and curiosity and, problem solving, the 4 C's, communication and collaboration, and the traditional literacies and so forth. We're talking about STEM. We're talking about ICT. We're talking about financial literacy. We're talking about civics and leadership, social and cultural awareness, and all these different skills that our kids need if they want to thrive in the future, because the future is uncertain. And so we need our kids to develop the right skills now if they're going to really be able to capitalize on the opportunities that present themselves in the future. So I think curriculum reform is a huge thing, but I think we need to have a vision of, what the ideal person will be. And then we also need to support these other organizations who are popping up. We have a company that has worked with us whose aim is to improve financial literacy for high school students. These are programs that need funding and they need to be supported. They need to thrive. We have another program, another company using our platform, and their thing is about digital skills that creating the idea that we can create digital entrepreneurs in the region. And if we just, because we're so uniquely located in the Caribbean, to kind of capitalize on this, this Western marketplace. Especially now, we're moving to remote workplaces. A lot of people want to come to the Caribbean because they love the sun and the beach and they want to work here, but our people as well, we can capitalize on those opportunities. And so they are focused on digital skills. And so the government can't do it all. And so we need to also support these other entities that are popping up and really passionate about certain literacies.
Right. One other thing that I add to that is, in the interest of time here, the idea that skills, of course, we want to ensure that everybody, we determine first what those 21st century skills are. So we got that. But then we also need to ensure that we're not pointing everybody in the same direction in terms of where they're supposed to go, right? One of the things that came out of the Pew District School Board's anti-Black racism kind of document or review was the idea that in large part, a lot of Black students were being pointed towards going to community colleges and stuff like that, instead of going to what you'd call traditional academic levels of university work. And so what we need to ensure across the board is that different people have different skill sets, right? That will take them in different directions, right? And we need to ensure that we understand what those different skill sets are, and also point them in the direction that is of value to them, right? So that's why we have, like vocational programs that are separate from traditional academic programs, because the truth is everybody can't be a doctor, everybody can't be a lawyer. There are other programs out there for people who want to do
but we want to make sure that the predictability of where these of where Black children end up is not sort of predetermined. So when we're deciding who can become doctors and who's going to go into vocational programs, we don't continue to slot Black people as if we're still on a plantation.
Correct.
And we have house slaves and field slaves.
Correct.
Because those days are done.
Correct.
Right.
But all options must be available, and students need
To all students.
All students
To
need
all
to determine,
students,
to all students, and all students need to determine what direction they're going to go to.
In the short term, we want them in science and technology. Let's go for it.
Okay.
And then long term, we can think about equality.
Fair enough.
Okay, thank you very much for those responses, Fiona. I know that I saw when you had that smirk, and I was like, Fiona works.
Oh, no, we can,
I love it. I love
we
it.
can keep going on that topic all day. Believe it. We can keep going on that
I
topic
was
all
saying,
day.
here goes Fiona.
I started laughing, and I was like, okay, here we go.
We don't.
I knew it was coming, but
in a great ideal world, not only would we have people being able to choose, all students being able to choose their pathways in fair and equitable ways. In an ideal world, the sort of ranking that we have for different jobs, in an ideal world, the teacher's job will be as important as the custodian's job,
right,
as important as the office manager's job, and they all pay a fair amount,
right?
Like the bus driver who's getting the kids to school, when we all are paid equally or fairly, we all can manage in our society, and we don't value things more than others, then Black children and their pathways are good. But at the moment, when we rank everything and pay is commensurate with how we rank,
and we need to change that. That's one thing that we need to change.
Okay, I think we have to pause the conversation since we don't have as much time.
Right.
But I know Annette will have to leave soon. But thank you very much for engaging in that conversation.
Yes.
Sorry for interrupting this flow. And I mean, I love the banter and all of it. For those of us who are just listening in via YouTube, we're looking at revolutionizing education through technology, and we're speaking with Smart Term Limited team this evening. It's a wonderful conversation happening here. I'm just going to pose a question before I leave, and I'm respectful of our panelists' time as well as our viewers, and we said that we'll keep it within an hour. We may have to go over maybe 2 minutes or so, but my next question to our panelists is, how can we reimagine an education system that supports students' overall success from early childhood to post-secondary levels? And I know I have a professor friend on here, Dr. Edwards. She teaches at the tertiary level as well. She'll be quite interested to hear some of this. And we also have someone from the ministry who was also a former panelist, Kiva Reed. Hi, Kiva. We also have a teacher here, Lavana. We have a parent here, Donna Lee, and we also have another parent from the United States, Simone. So in terms of the question, let me repeat it again. How can we reimagine an education system that supports students' overall success from early childhood to post-secondary levels?
Right. So I think I'll just throw something in first, because we've been talking a little bit about curriculum kind of changes and all that. So I think the first thing we need to do is to look at there's an entire kind of life cycle for students. So a student life cycle from early childhood education to secondary to tertiary education. And what we have to do at all levels is ensure that each level builds upon the other, right? And builds upon another in the right way. And so I think what's going to be important is when you're looking at, for example, at the elementary level, subject learning outcomes, and then those subject learning outcomes laddering up into the grade learning outcomes, and ensuring that it all comes together at that level. And ultimately at that specific level, whenever somebody moves from the elementary level to the secondary level, primary and secondary level, what ends up happening is that each thing must ultimately ladder and move into the next through our traditional kind of learning outcomes to ensure that people are learning as they're supposed to doing. And at each stage, we're going to test to ensure that students are ultimately learning what they're supposed to be learning at each level, right? And so that I will put that in, but that is going to be determined or be done through curriculum changes at each level and ensuring that it all kind of meshes together.
Great response, Theon. I think when we talk about reimagining an education system, by the way, I think it doesn't need to be something hypothetical. It's something that definitely needs to be done. And I think we need to move past the era where we see education as this supplementary, thing that we can use to enhance our outcomes. And I think we need to reimagine the education system with technology as a core enabler of the education system. And I'll talk just about a few things because this is incredibly complex. There's a lot of different perspectives we can have here. First and foremost, I want to look at the student because we're all focused on the student, right? Every student has, a different learning style, a different multiple intelligences. And teachers have to be able to respond to that. The education system needs to be able to respond to that. And so techniques such as differentiated instruction and assessment, we need to have these things at the core of our education system. The whole idea of personalization. I think Fiona just spoke about these different pathways and having education systems that are flexible, which has an impact on scheduling and resourcing and all of these different things. I think we have to reimagine education and understand that now we have technology that is quite mature, by the way. We have to figure out how can we address these things that before were kind of impossible. But now we have technology that can sit at the core of our education system. How can we address some of these issues with technology as an enabler that can really kind of shrink that equity divide and those, those issues that impact student success. As I said, there's a lot of things here, but I think we definitely need to, reimagine the education system, but with technology at its core being an enabler rather than something that's supplemental.
Thank you so much. I am seeing where one of our participants, and I have to go in a minute, but my other two co-hosts will take over. Dr. Edwards just typed in, she sent a private message to me and I'm just going to send it to everybody. I sent it to everybody, but she said, I think we need a part 2 of this topic. And yes, we're going to have a part 2. We're going to have a part 2. But I will leave it now, and Dr. Hardware and Miss Fiona Lloyd-Henry, Mistress Fiona Lloyd-Henry will be taking over. It was nice talking to everybody. Be well.
Nice to have you.
Nice to have you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Dr. Walker, see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
I think these are really interesting things, and we really do want to have a part 2 because there are a couple of things that have come up. Everything from the ideal student, that one is still sitting with me. I want to go back to what because the ideal student hardly ever looks like me, right? And so as we talk about what that ideal student looks like, that I think is a place for us to move, and we talk about revolutionizing education. I think as we think through that, what does it mean, and what might it mean for different people, including those people not constituted as ideal? What might they think that this revolutionized educational system might look like, right? So those are some really great thoughts I think I'd like to come back to, but I realize that we don't have all the world right.
We have 2 more questions, but in the interest of time, I see Dr. Edwards have their hand up, so perhaps we can open the floor given the time.
What I would really want to hear in part 2 is, from a very early age, we introduce our children to these technological devices, like to keep them quiet, to keep them, we want to cook, or do housework. So we turn on the tablet and we leave our 2-year-old with it, and she is quiet. And we keep checking to see if she's sleeping, but she's really watching. Now, how do we make this transfer from using this tool to keep her quiet to have her see it as an educational tool? And these are some of the information I would want to hear your perspective on when we come back for part 2, because we definitely need to have a part 2 on this topic. And the 2, I teach at the tertiary level, and my students, it's a diverse class now, and I'm enjoying it. I'm in Jamaica. My students are from Turks and Caicos, St. Lucia. I have a student from Rwanda, and I have students in the Cayman Island and so on. It's very diverse and it's very, very interesting. So I am getting to interact at another level with these students. And I do marketing like Adele. And when I did marketing management with this diverse group, the way we market some of our services and so on here is different from how they market it. I think she was from Curacao and so on, and she was telling us how the tourism and so on works there, how they market tourism and so on. So this topic, we cannot just leave it here. And I know the time is out and everything, but I'm pleading with the Mrs. Henry and Dr. Hardware, and of course, you'll pass my sentiments to Dr. Walker. We need to explore this topic some more. Yes, it's really broad, very interesting, and we need to explore it.
I think, I think Dr. Edwards has talked her way into being a panelist.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Edwards. But also want to emphasize, though, against the passive consummation for young kids of technology, right? There are numerous studies that advise against your kids passively engaging in technology just like that. And I know you mentioned that is to act as a child mining tool, but as much as possible, especially under 5, parents need to have engagement with children as they use these digital tools. Okay.
I would also give a little bit more credit to, for example, to Black creators, because to a large extent, we might not be the ones who design big programs like Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or those, but Black people have a whole space in these social media platforms as creators, and they know it. And it's quite powerful. It's a quite powerful block when it comes on to small content creation. So I think we have to sort of lean in and accept where we have, quite a bit of dominance, right? Like, so there's a lot of passive consumption, but there's quite a bit of creative work happening on the part of Black folks as well.
Okay. So just leaving space in case there's another member of the audience who might have a question. If not, then I don't know, Fiona, if you have any closing remarks, but then we'll just close it out.
If there are no more questions, I would just like to thank the panelists for coming on, and thank you for your work. Thank you for imagining how you can unify a lot of the work that educators do. I do know that they play, as an educator myself, I can tell you that these automations have or can have a huge impact in how we do our work. The more automated some of the sort of clerical pieces of our work become, then the more time we have to engage with our colleagues and with our students and with the families of our students. So in many ways, these things are important things. And I love to see Black folks in technology. So all around, it's good. It was really nice talking to you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And also want to thank the member of the audience who came out to support us, members of the viewing public. Please remember to engage with us on our social media platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. And as we were told to have a part 2, then looking forward to you joining for part 2. Thank you again to our panelists, and thank you for watching.
Thank you, Dr. Hardware. We really appreciate being here. I know time came upon us, but we really want to engage with our audience as well. So you all feel free to leave comments and questions on the YouTube video. We'll definitely be there to answer some of your questions, and we're definitely looking forward to a part 2.
Definitely, definitely. Looking forward to a part 2. Thank you for having us and for inviting us. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. We definitely appreciate it. And we'll be right back here maybe in a couple of weeks. So see you then.
Wonderful.
Okay. Thank you. We'll ask the panelists if they could stay back for 5 minutes.
Sure.